I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to share with you which phonics activities are best done in small group. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would love for you to do that, and then also hit the little bell so that you don't miss out on any of the new videos I post about teaching literacy. Okay, so let's start big picture. When you're teaching phonics, you can teach it in whole group, you can teach it in small group, you can teach it some in whole group and some in small group. There's a lot of different options. And actually in my book, the Phonics Playbook, I go over 3 main models for teaching phonics. Number 1 is whole group with differentiation, and I explain how to differentiate even if you're teaching whole group in this book. Number 2 is small phonics groups that are just focused on phonics, so super differentiated, which has some pros and cons, which we discuss in the book. And then the 3rd model I cover is more for like older students or kids who have progressed in their phonics knowledge to where they can have mostly reading focused small groups. Not that reading isn't phonics, because of course reading requires phonics, but then have like some word work as part of that small group instruction that is mostly focused on text reading. So again, in the book, I actually go through all of these options. The book is not just about teaching phonics in general, it's about how to differentiate your phonics instruction. And we are going to focus today in this video on like what should you actually be doing in your small groups, assuming that you're doing some small group instruction. Now you might be thinking, I don't think I have time for small group instruction in phonics. And that may be very true, but we're gonna talk in this video about how to sneak a little bit in, even if your time is tight and you have to do mostly whole group. So on that topic, I would love to hear from you. Do you currently, or do you plan on teaching phonics in a small group setting or a whole group setting? Would love to hear just kind of where you're at, or if it's some of each, in the comments. Now, if you're like most teachers, you would love to include all of your phonics instruction in a small group setting, because in a small group setting, number 1, it's just easier to reach kids and make sure they're on task. But number 2, that can be perfectly tailored to your students' needs when you're in small group versus teaching whole group. Because typically when you get a class of students, you are getting kids that are on a real range of levels, right? You might have kids who are behind, kids who are way ahead. And so then it's like, how do you create meaningful whole group instruction that meets the needs of all those kids? And I've actually, so this is a real challenge, and I talk about it in the book. And I actually saw this post recently on social media that was like, teaching is like you have to be a master chef for a group of like 20 to 30 kids, or 20 to 30 diners in this chef metaphor. And all of the diners have different needs and preferences. Some have food allergies, some are gluten-free, and you're having to cook meals for every single diner, even though they all have these different needs and preferences. And that sounds impossible, right? And you know, perfect differentiation, as I talk about in the book, really is impossible, because it's that same kind of scenario where every child has their own needs and there's typically only one teacher in the room, maybe 2 if you're lucky. And so it really is very hard to meet all of those needs. So I just want to acknowledge that before we dive into tips, because if you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time meeting all my kids' needs in phonics and they're all over the place, I just want you to know that you're not alone, and you've been tasked with this very challenging task of preparing these meals for all your different diners, aka all your different students and their phonics needs. So it really is hard. So coming back to that idea of, you know, it would be great to be able to teach phonics in small groups to all your students. That may work for you if you have a lot of time, but in many cases it won't work for you because, I mean, different reasons, right? Lack of time. Maybe your students can't work independently for that long, because if you have like 5 different groups, like that's a long time for the other kids to be working independently, and maybe you couldn't get to them every day. Well, K2 needs phonics instruction every single day, even like up into 3rd grade, I would say, needs daily phonics instruction. So if you can't meet with all your groups every day due to a lack of time, then you can't rely on small groups as the only way that you're teaching phonics, because then not all of your kids are getting phonics instruction every day, right? Okay, so I know I've shared a lot of ideas here. Let me kind of sum up the big takeaways. Number 1, phonics instruction does not have to be all whole group or all small group. you can kind of fit in some pretty much no matter what your schedule is, as long as you have, I would say, at least like 25 minutes for phonics instruction. I really feel like you need 30 to 40, depending upon what all you're trying to fit in. But usually you can sneak in at least a little bit of informal small group instruction like I talked about at the end. And again, how much you put in small group is really going to depend on how much time you have. And if you're able to, like, if you want to put it all in small group, that's great, but you have to make sure that you see all groups every day in the K3 range so that they get that important phonics instruction. Now, if you want to get really specific and see the schedules and the different models and how I do all of these routines that we just talked about, you got to check out the Phonics Playbook. I will include the link in the caption for this. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of what's in here, I'll give you a little sneak peek of the book. So chapter 1 is all about assessing kids and getting the right data, because that's really the first step in putting your kids in small group, right? Is knowing what the small group should be like. So I walk you step by step through that process. I talk about these different routines that we've talked about for phonics instruction, the 3 models that I mentioned at the beginning, how to choose the model that's right for you, special considerations for early kindergarten, because having been a kindergarten teacher, I know that kindergarten is a little different. And then my favorite chapter is actually how to teach phonics to English language learners. And then in the last chapter, I talk about differentiating students' independent phonics practice activities, because if you're doing this differentiation, then when they go to practice, of course, what they're practicing needs to match the differentiation that you've been doing in your, whether it's whole group or small group instruction. So check out the link for the caption, check out the link in the caption for the book. I hope you enjoy reading the Phonics Playbook, and I hope that this video was helpful too. Before you leave, it would mean so much to me if you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video.